Welcome back, troglodytes, to a historic episode of the Trogly's Guitar Show. I have found one of the prototypes of the Gibson Jimi Hendrix Stratocaster. This is going to be a long one, so make sure you use this little episode guide here to see the parts that you're most interested in. But first, let's learn a little bit of the history of this elusive and hated guitar. It was late 2009. After the successful 2006 run of the Jimi Hendrix Flying Vs that Gibson did, ideas were looming in the air of doing another V or an SG. However, once word that Jimi Hendrix, the manager of Authentic Hendrix brand, wanted to work with Gibson again, upper management at Gibson and Jani decided to do low-end Strat copies in a quantity sales over quality sales attempt. Authentic Hendrix and Gibson then birthed 3 packages that were made in China. There was the Experience, Signature, and Little Wing set. The first one, Experience, was going to retail at $449.99. You would get the guitar and all the needed accessories such as the truss rod adjustment tools and the whammy bar, but you got a small practice amp called the Voodoo Child, a Foxy Fuzz pedal, a deluxe gig bag, instructional DVD, a guitar tuner, 2 guitar cables, a Hendrix-inspired strap with Authentic Hendrix branding on it, 3 Hendrix picks, a USB full of Hendrix material, and a Hendrix tie-dye t-shirt with bandana. Now, if you don't care about having a fuzz pedal or you don't need a fancy shirt and you already have 1 cable, you don't need a second one, you could save yourself $117 and pick up the Signature package. But then there was one that was $83 cheaper at $249.99. This one was called the Little Wing. Now, just by reading specs, you might be confused what the difference between the Signature and Little Wing is. Because at an $83 price difference, you just didn't get a tuner and you didn't get the USB full of Hendrix material. But that doesn't make any sense. Those things aren't worth $83. Well, the Little Wing was white in color and had a slightly different headstock design. Also note that the body looks completely different. It is more Strat in style and has the output jack recessed into the front instead of on the side. The amp that came with it was also white and did not have the Hendrix branding on it. It was called Max Feedback. But that one came with that guitar, the amp, the instructional DVD, a gig bag, a single 10-foot cable, a strap, and 3 picks. But then there was another mythical beast that was set to be made by Gibson USA. None of those guitars were ever finished. They had a similar design to these Chinese-made ones, but their headstock had a black veneer over it. It was a set neck Stratocaster with an access heel cutaway joint. And it appears the trem system was going to be further back in the body. Photos have surfaced online since then of tons of the original bodies for that run of guitars, as well as boxes of the necks. However, I have never seen a photo of a completed one, so the world may never know what that guitar was actually going to look like. Now, how could Gibson do something like this? Well, it was very timely with a US trademark trial appeal for Fender in March of 2009. That was when Fender was denied trademark protection of their Stratocaster, Telecaster, and P-bass guitar body design. So that kind of lit the fire between this project being able to go on ahead. So September 2009, Gibson first posted their plans of partnering with Authentic Hendrix brand again in an interview with Jani. And in that interview, they said they have plans for a whole line of Jimi-inspired instruments. This was just the beginning. As soon as that story was published, the internet caught on fire. They hated Gibson so much, they were cursing Janie's name. This was such a terrible way to represent Hendrix. Such an iconic guitar player, known for playing a Fender Strat, not a Gibson Strat. And he's being represented with this cheap Chinese garbage? That is what the internet was saying. They were so upset, and you know, I can understand the mentality behind it. There are so many people out there till this day that just hate Gibson for this idea, representing Hendrix in such an unflattering manner. Within days, all traces of this guitar were gone. Deleted from the website, never to be heard of again. Canned. Zilch. Nada. These never went to production. They never saw the light of day.
So how in the world did I get this?
Okay, remember that instructional DVD? Well, somebody has to make that. And in order to make an instructional DVD, you kind of need the guitar that it's instructing about. This is the unreleased prototype that was sent to Marco Coconut in order to make the instructional DVD for this guitar. He got the experience package and he got the little wing package. So at least one of each of these guitars exists.
And as a fun fact, Marco shared with me that the fuzz pedal actually didn't work, and they just used special effects to get this beautiful light right here.
Now, unfortunately, I think he sold that white one before I could find it, but this is the higher end version anyways, and we get to document it today in a very thorough way. And by the way, if you're interested in seeing the full unreleased instructional DVD, he is selling it on his website, so make sure you check out that link in the description if you're interested in that. So here it is, guys. This is the unreleased prototype of the Jimi Hendrix Experience Stratocaster. It's been called cheap Chinese garbage for way too long. Let's actually get a real opinion of this magnificent piece of kinda Gibson history here. I teased this guitar in my unboxing video. I let you see the back, but now we can see the front. But let's get my first impressions of this guitar. In person, this isn't just stupid articles online. We actually get to really experience this guitar. So visual, on the front, the very first thing that caught my eye was this headstock. Okay, Jimmy was known for playing guitars upside down because he was a lefty, right? He just strung them up the way he could actually play them. But despite being semi-what Strat-like, this is completely just a Firebird headstock. Take a look here. The only difference is it's a little less pointy in this area, and you don't have that black headstock veneer / truss rod cover over it. But the tuners are in very similar positions. On top of that, what makes this even freakier is if you think of it like a Firebird, Gibson headstocks, what do? They tilt back. That's why they're prone for headstock repairs. But this is Strat styled where it kind of bends slightly up.
So it's kind of like playing one of those vintage SG-100s that don't have the angled headstocks.
So it's the opposite direction of what you're used to seeing. Despite being birthed by Gibson, since this was not actually made by Gibson, it has the Jimi Hendrix signature branding on it. However, as you can see here on the box, Gibson did put their name on these. It's got a Strat body. The top is very familiar, but then the bottom is like more like a Jaguar kind of, with the way it's rounded here and then it kind of carves in. I don't have a lot of experience with Strats, but I know the fin is usually just like right here, whereas this one, it's like the complete bottom portion of this guitar. It kind of makes it look a little bit weird. And you'll notice this bridge pickup is slanted the opposite way that it usually is. What's the point of that? Well, once again, Hendrix played them upside down, so Janie Hendrix, his adopted sister by the way, felt that that was an integral part of his sound, so they reversed it. The next thing I noticed visually, in typical Gibson fashion, they did a maple fretboard on top of a maple neck, whereas most times Fender will just make that out of a single piece. And something else that impressed me on this one is the nut is cut very nicely. Usually Chinese guitars, your nut, you basically always have to redo them right away. But this thing has a really nice setup. But being a prototype, being sent to a guy that has to play this and make it sound and look good, well, that probably has something to do with it. But overall, I thought this guitar, you know, it has a decent first impression. And then I flipped it over to the back. Yeah, we've got the cheap tuners going on, but you have a very pronounced volute right here. Now, sometimes the way the Strat headstocks are done, there's like a little bump right here. It's not necessarily a volute, but this one, no doubt about it, that is an intentional volute. And you have the authentic Hendrix branding right here. The back of the guitar, it still has that comfort cut, but it's like a thicker body than a regular Strat. Again, I don't have tons of experiences with them, but don't they come to like a more rounded point instead of being flat around the edges? I mean, it's especially prevalent on this side.
And the reasoning for that is probably because they put the output jack on the side instead of the front of the instrument like you would normally see.
I actually kind of like this because it doesn't slide around like a normal Strat would on me. So now let's talk about the feel of this guitar. In typical Gibson fashion, they don't lacquer their maple fretboards. I hate that, modern Gibson. Change it back to the way it's supposed to be. Do it like you did in the 70s and 80s. So there's like a really thin satin finish on this, as well as on the neck. So you don't have a really glossy neck or anything. It's actually pretty comfortable to play. Nice and smooth, easy to travel up and down the neck. The only thing I noticed playability-wise is I think the frets need polished and we need some new strings because it feels a little rusty, and I don't want to say stiff because it's not stiff playing, it's just kind of uncomfortable right now. So we'll go ahead and take care of that a little bit later on. The body does have a full gloss finish. I'm sure it's probably some sort of poly finish. But overall, it feels pretty good. It's got a hefty weight to it. We'll throw it on the scale in a little bit. The knobs turn easily, so no problems with the electronics there. The trem bar, it's very stiff. You've kind of got to really push on it. It's not necessarily comfortable to use, but you can use it for like Bigsby type vibratos. And that works out really well. But the biggest thing that blew my mind, 1, 2, 3. They put a 3-way style switch in a Strat guitar. Okay, so the original Strats, yes, they started off with 3-way positioning. Maybe that has something to do with what Hendrix originally played, but I was definitely surprised to only find a 3-way in here instead of what we expect today as the 5 position. I'll have to see if I can jerry-rig the 2nd and 4th positions out of this like you can do on the vintage ones. So that's about all I can tell you about the history of this one, as well as my first impressions. Now let's go ahead, throw it on the workbench, and maybe somebody can identify which Chinese factory this was made at just by the body routes, as well as get some more detailed specs and see what makes this guitar up.
First things first though, I had to get those strings off and polish these frets, because as you can see from this photo, and then the after photo, they definitely needed it. Alright, so inside the infamous Jimi Hendrix Gibson Strat. Here you can see these rectangular routes. That's interesting. I have not seen this before. Here you can see where the ground wire comes out, so it's not like the glary Strat where they just kind of drilled straight through the body here and broke part of it out. But what does look familiar are the pickups, just like those glary Strats we have. So I don't think these pickups are necessarily going to be anything super special now that I've seen this, but hey, red, white, and blue. The pots read alpha, and it looks like 250K is visible on that. They're a full-size pot, they've got the shielding, and this is what our 3-way toggle switch is looking like. Pickup reading wise, the neck is reading 6.35K ohms, the center position ohms at 3.23, and the bridge position gives us a 6.41. Furthermore, looking at the pickguard, it is 3-ply, so you have a white, black, white layer. And we'll just take a look over the pickups here real quick. Single master volume with 2 tone controls. Again, it is a 3-way toggle switch. And you have the authentic Hendrix sticker, which will come off. And I think there's also a plastic film over this yet. I was definitely right that these frets needed polished. And now look at these sparkling beauties. The only thing I really noticed as shoddy craftsmanship is the 5th inlay right here. You see the wood's like a little bit gouged up when they were routing it for that. I mean, the nut job was great. The fret work feels very good. There's no like fret sprout or anything. I'm surprised how nice this guitar does feel. I can't wait to put some fresh strings on it and really give it a run for its money. But now the big question, is this Gibson scale 24 3/4 inch or Fender scale 25.5? They went with 25.5, which makes sense based on all the other little attributes that makes this very Hendrix styled. The nut width is 1.67 inches, and by the 12th fret, 2.05 inches. Neck depth at the 1st fret is 0.81 inches, and at the 12th fret, 0.95. And it's a really nice rounded neck profile. It's kind of medium, but yet beefy. Here's the headstock. This thing does utilize a single string tree that's drilled right into the J in Jimmy. You can see what that looks like right here. It has this little metal insert on it. But hey, now we get to see the full logo in its full glory. There is a truss rod. You can see it right there. It's your overseas styled one that uses the Allen key for adjustment. Here's also a good area where you can see that the maple fretboard slopes off and then joins onto this maple neck right there. The back tremolo cover is not recessed into the body at all, it just sits proud on top of it. And here you can see the nice clean route in here, as well as the tremolo type it's using. The neck plate does have a serial number on it. You can see it's 0907, looks like 180011. And here you can see the type of Strat button that was used. Looks just like your standard one with a felt protector pad. With the neck plate off, you can see it's just your standard assembly. Has the black back plastic plate there on top of that, and then this is what that looks like. And the reason I took the neck off is I wanted to see if there's any like special stamps or anything. And I can't quite read what that says. It almost looks like it might say demo, but who knows. But this is what the neck is looking like at the part that you cannot see. What I like is that the heel actually has a little bit of flame to it, which is kind of cool. The neck with tuners installed weighs 1 pound 12.7 ounces. And the other reason why I wanted the neck off is I wanted to see if there was any exposed wood. That way we could figure out what the bodies were going to be made of. I'm not a wood expert, so I will let you guys take a look at this. My guess would be something like basswood or something else that's usually used on these import models. But I'll let you take a look at this wood grain. This neck cavity is actually a little bit rough feeling, like it's not completely smooth. You can also kind of see it, it's a little bit wavy. But I don't see any type of date stamp in here or anything. And now I'm going to install a proper Gibson neck on it from a 1980s Gibson Sonics. If it's going to be a Gibson Strat, it might as well... Just kidding, guys. We're not going to get that crazy. And now on to the rest of the neck. Again, it's got that smooth satin finish to it, so that's not like most Strats you have. And the authentic Hendrix silk screen and these style of tuners. You can tell the wood has a slightly different color right there as well. If we get it in the light just right, you can tell it's a two-piece body, because I do not see any other seams besides that one right in the center. Since it's the Gibson Strat, let's put some Gibson bright wires on it. So if the production run was going to be anything like this, I think we would have been okay with this guitar. I would like to point out a few other small defects I found. Is the start of the typical Strat neck crack, where they're usually just superficial in the paint or just a little tiny crack that doesn't affect it too much, but you do kind of have that going on there. And at the factory, you can see the finish that they put over this was a little bit thicker in these areas. I think they would consider that like a paint run or something. And the wood is a little bit rough right there, like it wasn't sanded properly. So, a few minor issues, but for the most part, hey, these are actually gonna look pretty alright, I think, for a beginner set of instruments. But let's go ahead and see how this thing sounds.
Alright, so how did it sound? Surprisingly pretty darn good. You know, for being a low-end instrument, yeah, when you get it distorted, it's a little bit loose, it's not nice and tight. But I enjoyed the clean sound. You got a nice deep bassy tone out of your neck pickup, middle position gave you the quackiness, and you got a decent lead tone out of your bridge. Now you could say, hey buddy, you're running it through $1,000 tube amps, of course it's gonna sound good. But even when I played this through lower end solid state amps, it still sounded pretty good. So at the $449 price point, with everything that was included with this, honestly, I think they would have been an okay deal. And it wasn't just the cheap guitar that people thought it was going to be. I mean, remember, this was just going to be a Hendrix brand of guitars that they just happened to partner with Gibson to help them produce because they already have all the connections. So, no, this is not a Gibson guitar. It's a Jimi Hendrix guitar. It was meant to be a whole lineup of guitars that were Jimi themed. I think the internet shot down something maybe a little bit too early. Because wouldn't it be great if there was a Jimi Hendrix like high-end USA custom shop for things? Because this was probably just the start of this company.
Unfortunately, this one does not have all the case candy. Either Marco didn't send it to me, he wanted to keep it, or maybe they just weren't actually made yet and the stock photos were just photoshops. But this is what the strap would have looked like. You can see the Hendrix logo on it, as well as the vintage style right there. This is the cable it came with, as well as the truss rod adjuster tool, and the legendary guitar picks that came with it. And here's the box it came in. We'll just take a look at this. You can see this is the higher end experience package. It's got Jimmy's face on it right there. And he's not playing one of these guitars, he's playing an actual Fender. And the front and the back of the box is the same. We'll take a look around the edges. This is what's really important, is you can see the Gibson name on this box. Right down here, in cooperation with Gibson. Well, as well as being made in China. And then you have a continuation of that graphic. And the other side of the box is pretty much the same thing with the same information printed. I wish I had the Foxy fuzz pedal, because I think that would have been interesting to demo, but I do have the little mini amp. Now pretty much any tiny solid state mini amp, they're good for practice, and that's about it. But let's go ahead, plug this one in, see how it sounds. So, it's decent. It's a lot better than that little glary one we had. The distorted channel sounds a little bit harsh, but I was surprised just how loud this thing could get. I believe it's a 20-watt solid-state amp. So is it something I would buy separately? No, but if it's part of a bundle, I think it's a welcome addition.
So, what's a guitar like this worth?
It very well may be one of only a few prototypes ever made, and a lot of people are interested in seeing this guitar, but not quite as many actually want to own it.
This is kind of something that just has a really strange value, where if you're a collector and you want to own a very controversial piece of unreleased Gibson history, you might have to pay out the nose for it. Honestly, I'm not even super interested in selling this one, but hey, if you got a crazy offer, let me know. So I hope you enjoyed this in-depth look at this guitar that survived the chopping block. These were all supposed to be destroyed and they were never produced. This is a survivor of one of those guitars. Hopefully this video does not get Gibson in trouble for not remembering to take this back from Marco Coconut or whatnot. But at least now we know the history and we know how this guitar actually sounds and feels to play. Thank you troglodytes for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe because I post videos just like this pretty much every single day. Take care.